is because it's a really important issue to actually have sovereignty in our country and have the rule of law upheld. We've also, as a state, from really the beginning of the Biden administration, been leaning in on the issue, including helping Texas in the past, and we've offered a number of assets, boats, planes, and personnel to help now. And so we stand by ready to help with that, because I think what you're seeing is going to be really, really bad, potentially very shortly. We have our Department of Children and Family Secretary Siobhan Harris and members of the Florida Legislature, our Senate President Kathleen Passidomo and House Speaker Paul Renner. We also have Senator Ileana Garcia and Representatives Overdorf and Lamarca, as well as from all the way up in Pensacola, Representative Michelle Salzman. So thank you for your efforts on these bills. We're also joined by Savannah Parvu, who's going to speak about her experience, and Sergeant Thomas McInerney, who's going to speak about his experience. We've been very proud to be a law and order state. We've been supportive of law enforcement, the people that wear the uniform, since the day I became governor. We've never wavered in that. We've never wavered in the idea that people commit crimes, need to be held accountable. We're not going to let the inmates run the asylum in the state of Florida, and partially because of that, and through the hard work of so many people who are working the streets at municipal level, county level, and our state law enforcement agencies, Florida's crime rate's at a 50-year low. And that's not what you're seeing in other parts of the country. Last month, I signed legislation reforming Florida's death penalty procedures so that if you have somebody like the shooter at Parkland kill innocent people, that they are more likely to get the ultimate punishment, and one or two jurors can't nullify that sentence. We also authorized the death penalty for pedophiles. That should be available for the worst of the worst, and we're going to continue to make strong stands in those regards. What we've seen across the country, including here in Florida, is rates of human trafficking increasing. Last year, across the country, there was a 50% increase in arrests for human trafficking. And this obviously is focusing mostly on women and children. Last year, 72% of all human trafficking victims were illegal aliens, many coming across the southern border. Of course, just getting to the border, there's a whole host of problems that happen with the cartels and with these other people. There's a lot of abuse that takes place, but clearly this border policy of the Biden administration has wrought huge, huge damage to society, and we see that here in Florida and throughout the country. We have done a lot, obviously, there's federal, local, state, with human trafficking specifically, but we've worked hard in the last couple years on the interdiction of human smuggling and trafficking rings coming into Florida from the southern border, mostly through the I-10 and the Florida Panhandle. And we're proud to have taken a lead on that. It's led to a lot of arrests, a lot of people taken off the streets who were really bad news. We also signed Senate Bill 1808 to fight illegal immigration and require law enforcement to work with ICE to enforce federal immigration laws. Obviously, this administration doesn't want to do that. And then just this past week, we signed SB 1718, which is probably the strongest bill in the country to curtail illegal immigration, and it include enhanced penalties for human smuggling. And I think it's going to make a difference. Earlier this year, I called, last year, I called the Florida Supreme Court to impanel a statewide grand jury to examine the international smuggling networks that are bringing illegal aliens to the southern border and even into Florida. The most recent report didn't get a lot of media attention, but it should have, and here is one of the lines from the report, quote, "The federal government is facilitating the forced migration, sale, and abuse of foreign children. This process exposes children to horrifying health conditions, constant criminal threat, labor and sex trafficking, robbery, rape, and other experiences not done justice by mere words," end quote. And so the grand juries discovered that more than 250,000 unaccompanied alien minors entered the United States since January 20th of 2021. And then they're shipped off to federal facilities. There's different pressures on how those things are handled. And the bottom line is it's just a rotten system. It's a rotten way to do business, and it's causing harm to a lot of people. So all in, human trafficking across this country is a $150 billion illegal enterprise. And I'm here to say that Florida, we want to use every resource at our disposal to put human traffickers out of business and into jail. And that's why we're here today. We've got a series of bills that I'm going to be signing momentarily that are going to make a difference here in the state of Florida. The first bill is SB 7064 to combat human trafficking and support victims of human trafficking. And so the legislation does a couple things. First, it establishes a civil action against traffickers and allows victims to recover damages from adult entertainment establishments. It's going to serve as a deterrent for some of those people, knowing that now they can be liable in a more direct way financially. The legislation also allows human trafficking victims to receive restitution from the sale of their traffickers' seized property. And additionally, the legislation increases penalties for adult entertainment establishments that exploit minors from a first-degree misdemeanor. It's now going to be a third-degree felony. We understand that there's a lot that end up working in these establishments. So this is something that is important to recognize when you're talking about human trafficking. Some people that get forced into this kind of becomes all they know, and sometimes it's hard to get out, even if they ultimately want to. You know, we look at it and say, well, why would someone want to do it? But when you're in those situations, you're treated like that for a long time. You may not have anywhere to go. So this bill requires prostitution and lewdness offenders to attend an educational program that will direct them away from traffickers and toward supportive resources. Also, every officer, when recruited to serve in law enforcement, will be required to receive 4 hours of training in identifying and investigating human trafficking. Bill also requires the University of South Florida to house and operate the statewide data repository for anonymous human trafficking data to evaluate trends and evaluate the effectiveness of state initiatives in combating human trafficking. So that's a lot, and that's only one of the bills. The other bill, another bill, Senate Bill 1690, this will require hotels to follow current human trafficking awareness laws and to enhance protection for the likeliest targets, young children. So under current law, you know, they can kind of follow, and then they get a slap on the wrist and all that. We're done with that. If you are in violation, you have a small period to cure. And every day beyond that you don't cure, you are going to be liable for thousands of dollars in fines every single day. And so I think that will be something that will really, really light a fire and will make sure that these establishments are taking this responsibility more seriously. There's also facilities known as residential treatment centers for children where young people can receive intensive round-the-clock treatment for their behavioral health challenges, including the trauma suffered by victims of human trafficking. This bill requires these facilities to place signs on their premises warning children about the dangers of human trafficking and providing avenues for reporting human trafficking. At children's safe houses, SB 1690 enhances security requirements. It requires safe houses and foster homes to have age-appropriate programming that will help kids identify the signs and understand the dangers of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. The bill also raises the standard of care at foster homes and safe houses for victims of human trafficking. The wounds these victims bear are unique and are traumatic. Foster homes and safe houses need to have appropriate tools in place to meet the moment. We're also requiring the statewide Council on Human Trafficking to conduct a study and make recommendations regarding the regulation of adult safe houses. These safe houses are residential facilities that provide housing and care specifically for survivors of human trafficking. Finally, House Bill 1465. We are taking action to strengthen penalties for the dangerous criminals who prey on these victims. So this bill makes human traffickers eligible for mandatory minimum sentences when they possess or discharge a firearm during the course of their trafficking crime. So if you violently force victims into trafficking in this state, you are going to pay a very, very stiff penalty. So all in all, this is a very strong package of bills. I'm excited to be able to be here to sign these measures into law. There's a lot that went on over the last 6 months in terms of the legislative product that our legislators were able to generate. I commend them for really doing great work, working very hard, and making sure that the things that we set out to do, that we are accomplishing, and then some. All right, so we're going to hear from some folks before I move to sign the bill. So first, we'll hear from our triumphant Attorney General, fresh off these great court victories.
Thank you, Governor. And let me just say, from the moment we were elected in 2018, father of two, soon thereafter 3, said, we are going to stop human trafficking in Florida. We knew that Florida is a ripe state for activity like this. We lead, by the way, we led last year in tourism. We have some of the largest events that draw people into our state, and we have a heavy agriculture industry, all of which add to the risks of being a high human trafficking state. And with his leadership and great legislative leaders, along with our incredible Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, who sits on our Human Trafficking Council, not a year has gone by that we have not strengthened or added laws in Florida to go after traffickers and better protect victims every single year. So as the Attorney General, but certainly as a mother, I could not be more proud of this state and this governor's leadership. We are not only going to go after these traffickers in a more significant way, we are going to strengthen how we protect our victims after they're rescued. And if I can just for a moment say thank you to my friend, Savannah Parvu. She is a previous victim of human trafficking. You're going to hear from her today. She doesn't like to address large crowds, but she is so proud of this state and so wants to make a difference and change the lives of others that came behind her, that she was willing to be here and talk to all of you. We thank her so much for being a guardian of all of these other young children and young adults that are being trafficked. Thank you, Savannah, for being here today and sharing with us how important this legislation is. And let me just say, from the Attorney General's perspective and a statewide prosecutor, we go after these traffickers and we see what they're doing and how they're profiting from these victims. In one of our cases, a man took a vulnerable woman, got her addicted to drugs, kept feeding her drugs, eventually put her in strip clubs and started profiting off her work in strip clubs. We went after him hard. He is serving 30 years. In another instance, young women were smuggled across our border, our wide open border. Now think about this. I'm going to tell you about 8 women. Think about how many this has happened to. Brought over, told they owed a significant debt. Those that took custody of these women kept them in a very small apartments, had firearms, would only let them out if they went with them, started funneling them through strip clubs, making money off them, making them money off sex trafficking. These women were afraid for their lives, and they were told they took all of their identification was taken away from them. We were able to learn about this, get a hold of them, bring one away from their traffickers while they were out without them seeing. Yes, they were being trafficked. We rescued those 8 women. When we looked back at what they had been through and how they were making money, a lot of it included those strip clubs. And so what today's legislation does, and again, not a year has gone by that we have not improved our laws, and we will keep doing that, but it gives those victims of trafficking the ability to go after these organizations and venues that are profiting from their pain, so that we can hold those accountable that are facilitating and helping these traffickers. That is how we will stop this in Florida. If they know that we mean business, if traffickers don't have operational support to traffic their victims, that's how we will stop trafficking. So thank you so much for caring about this issue. We're so grateful that we have media with us today that is helping highlight the amazing attention and diligence and perseverance of this great governor as it pertains to human trafficking. I can tell you, I have watched him over the last 5 years, and he's just getting started. Thank you again.
Okay, Kathleen.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership in this very important issue. I've been in the legislature since 2010, and I can assure you the last couple of years have been groundbreaking and game-changing with regard to how we deal with human trafficking in this state. And with the leadership of our governor, our attorney general, our lieutenant governor, and specifically our colleagues in the House and the Senate, you know, oftentimes we hear about fractious issues that are appearing in the legislature. This subject is so deeply embedded in what we do. The members of the legislature that have been involved in these bills worked so hard to come up with really meaningful legislation that is holistic. We want to protect the victims, number one priority, working with law enforcement, with stakeholders. We want to protect the victims. Secondly, we are making sure to hold the traffickers accountable. We want to see, you know, I think I've heard the governor say, put them in jail, throw away the key, and lock them up, because that's what has to happen. And so I want to thank the governor for the leadership and starting this process over the last couple of years. Our Attorney General has been tireless, and my colleague over on the other side of the rotunda, Speaker Renners, we really care, and we are going to do the right thing. So I thank you for participating, for asking us to be here, and let's keep on the right track. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be with you guys, and unfortunately this is another example where we see the federal government going consistently in the wrong direction, but we have a great governor who's moving Florida in the right direction on issues like this. As he said, you know, we've got hundreds of human traffickers that are coming across our open border and thousands of new human trafficking victims, which is absolutely tragic. But here today, with the governor's leadership, we're doing something about it. I want to make sure to recognize my House colleagues that were involved. Toby Oberdorf, if you would stand up. Toby's on our state task force, and then we also have Michelle Salzman with us. They are instrumental in some of the bills that are going to be signed today, and I also want to recognize your hometown boy, Lighthouse Point, original, Chip LaMarca. But this bill will give our law enforcement the resources they need, and of course, separate from this bill, we have invested and given honor and love to our law enforcement like no other state. This is the best state in the country for our law enforcement, and because of that, we have the resources and the dedication to make sure we take down these human trafficking rings, but also to give the tools to the victims, not only to have redress to their traffickers in the way of a litigation option, but also counseling, a safe place for that long road back to a normal life and coming out of that horrible, horrible situation. And as the Attorney General said, we will not quit. We will continue to work diligently until there's not a single human trafficking victim here in the state of Florida. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. It's an honor to be here for the signing of this momentous legislation. You, along with the Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General Moody, have been tireless advocates around human trafficking, and the positive impact is evident. As a mom and as the secretary of a department that plays such an important role in supporting survivors, I am immeasurably grateful for your leadership in this area. I'd also like to thank all of the legislators who worked on these bills and ensured that they made it to the finish line. At DCF, we take seriously our role in protecting Floridians from human trafficking and ensuring victims receive the recovery services they need to not only survive, but to thrive. Human trafficking is a heinous crime, and its perpetrators generally prey on more vulnerable individuals. In Florida, our elected leaders have maintained a strong and clear message that Florida is no home for traffickers, and for almost 2 decades, we've led the nation in passage of laws aimed at bringing these perpetrators to justice and supporting survivors. Today is a celebration of that history and forward momentum. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the multitude of survivors who've shared their stories. Their immense bravery has increased attention on this topic and is making a difference. In 2014, DCF was authorized to certify safe houses and safe foster homes for children, helping to ensure human trafficking survivors have a place to stay while they receive critical recovery care. This has been transformational, and I'm so thrilled that Senate Bill 1690 empowers us to do the same for adult survivors. We know a crucial component of the recovery process is ensuring that trauma-informed and responsive services are incorporated within the treatment programming. This bill ensures that adult safe homes are providing these critical services and so much more. I look forward to working with Attorney General Moody and members of the Council on the study that will help DCF in establishing the certification requirements. Raising awareness of human trafficking is such an important part of our prevention efforts. We fully embrace the concept of knowledge is power, and through this bill, we'll be expanding education efforts in the form of age-appropriate material placed more strategically in prominent places in residential settings on the dangers of human trafficking and how to report suspected human trafficking activity. I believe we all can play a role in bringing greater awareness to this important topic, and we stand ready at DCF to amplify outreach, messaging, and support for survivors, and I'm confident the additional safeguards outlined in these bills will reap significant benefits. Thank you.
My name's Savannah Parview, and I am a survivor of human trafficking. I grew up in Central Florida, and both of my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics. And I can remember back before I even started kindergarten, I was always told that I'm not supposed to talk about what happened at home or I would be taken to a bad place. And I never knew what I wasn't supposed to talk about or what the bad place was, just that I couldn't talk about anything that happened at home. My father had a stroke that left him disabled when I was 9, and after that my mom got involved with more drugs, and she would do anything she had to do to get her drugs. She would go out and steal stuff at night, and then she eventually started prostituting herself for her drugs. And she was always very open with me about what she was doing because I guess she felt that was better than keeping it from me. But I would go with her sometimes, and I would wait in the car, or I would wait for her to be done because I always wanted to be with her because I never knew when I went to sleep at night if she would be there when I woke up or when she would be coming back. And there was a time when I was 11 that I went with her she was going to prostitute herself, and her drug dealer offered her a $10 piece of crack for me instead of for her. And so she told him that was fine, he could do whatever he wanted, so he took and sold me to other people and gave her a $10 piece of crack. And after that, I began being sold on a regular basis to where she would get her crack and he would take and sell me to other people, either at his house or other people's houses. When I was 12, I started being sold out of a hotel in Central Florida. We went to the same hotel lot, and the staff there actually assisted him by allowing people in the room so that he didn't have to stay there with me. So they knew what was happening, but they never did anything to help me. I was trafficked on a regular basis between the age of 11 and 13. And then I watched both of my parents try to commit suicide when I was 13, and I was placed in foster care. And after that, I started cutting myself because I wanted to know what it felt like when my parents tried to commit suicide. And back then, cutting wasn't as common as it is now, so I was placed in group home after group home and eventually placed in a residential treatment center for kids in foster care. And once I got there, I found out that the staff were friends with my trafficker, so I continued to be trafficked while I was in foster care. And so off and on, between the ages of 11 and 26, I was trafficked. And I didn't get help until I learned what human trafficking was, and that what happened to me was human trafficking, and that I wouldn't be in trouble for it because that's what I was always told, that it was my fault and I would be in trouble. And so I finally got the help that I needed, and I now share my experiences, as Attorney General said, so that other people don't have to go through what I did, and to help change things that could have helped me, such as the hotel legislation. The training that that I helped get passed in 2019, that was great, but the hotel that I was trafficked at when I was 12 has been in violation of that law for at least 5 times in the last 2 years that it's been in law. So it's still happening at the same place that I was trafficked at. And I look forward to continuing to share my experiences to be the person that I needed when I was younger. Because I remember wanting to know somebody who had been through something similar to me and was doing well, because I didn't think it was possible. So now it is my goal to be that for other people.
Good morning. I'm Sergeant Thomas McNamee at the Broward Sheriff's Office. It'd be very hard to follow Savannah and her amazing story there. It's very amazing, very brave of you to do that. Here in South Florida, obviously traffickers don't stay local. They travel across jurisdictional boundaries for law enforcement. So we work every day closely with our state partners, as well as our local police agencies here in Broward County and across the state to combat this very horrific crime that continues to grow and grow each year. In law enforcement, we are absolutely overwhelmed with it at this point. We continue to grow. We appreciate the governor's support, the Attorney General's office, and our state representatives with passing these bills today that are greatly going to assist us in our efforts to combat human trafficking and identify the victims and rescue them out there. The bills, I know, offer a lot of enhancements for penalties, which is great, restitution for the victims, which is also very positive, but the education and awareness and reporting is key, especially in our hotel systems down here in South Florida and across the state. Hotels are usually first point of contact for law enforcement with victims. Hotels are utilized, as we all know, for commercial sex acts on a regular basis. They also serve as temporary housing for a lot of human trafficking victims as they're being transported across our state. So having educated staff at these hotels with reporting requirements is key for us to give us that intel that we need to do what we do in law enforcement and go after them as well. Also with the group homes and the foster care systems, obviously traffickers prey on the most vulnerable victims we have out there. And a lot of our children inside this system, unfortunately, are vulnerable, and the traffickers prey on them. But they're very targeted grooming tactics. So again, the awareness and education component there is key. A lot of times these group homes can become recruiting grounds for human trafficking, as Savannah discussed earlier. So this bill would definitely help us in those efforts. I will say that the men and women in law enforcement that are dedicated to this very unique investigation are extremely passionate. They dedicate their lives to it, and we'll do everything we can in law enforcement to continue to fight, identify the victims, and arrest those that are responsible for it. So thank you very much.
All right, well, we'll everyone want to come around who's going to be in part, and we'll get this done right here. Everyone up here? Anyone else? Okay. Today's the 16th? Okay, who wants one from SB 7064?